G'day, welcome to Pay It Forward. Now today I am bringing you all a pattern. It's my most requested pattern, and that is a project to create a bear or an animal doll with fabric only and no joints. So that's what I've done in a more of a medium size, so very much a companion doll. And the beauty of this project is that I've created the body to suit my kitty and my dachshund patchwork dolls, the ones that lie straight out. You know the ones I'm talking about. So you can make a cat version of this doll and also a little puppy version of this doll. I've made it up in the bear so that you also get the third one. So what a versatile pattern. Now, you all asked for fabric, so this one needs to be made up in fabric. It won't work in plush. It won't work in fur. It needs to be a fabric. However, you can make it up in fleece fabric. Now, he's got beautiful, teddy bear feet. So you've got all of the lovely components of a bear without all the difficult work. This pattern is so simple and it's really good for beginners. You can sew the whole thing up on your machine. It's very quick and easy, no tricky parts at all. And the jointing is a simple button at the back of the head. So I'm really excited to bring you this one because I think this is going to give you a whole range of things to make. You're only limited by your imagination. So I've got your free pattern in the drop down description box below. All you need to do is find that link, open it up. You can print out your free pattern templates on your own home printer. Have a look there. There's also I've put a paragraph on printing recommendations, so have a read of that, and also make sure that you are using the measuring bar that I've got on every page of your pattern to make sure that your pattern pieces are correct. So are you ready? This is going to be a quick one. Let's get busy and make a simple rag bear. So let's get started on our bear by having a look at our pattern pieces that we're going to need. We're going to start with the body pieces. I have got 2 body back pieces and 2 body front pieces. You'll notice that they are interfaced with a fusible woven cotton interfacing. Now I get asked this all the time, do I have to interface it? If you want great results, yes you do. Also, interfacing your fabrics makes it so much easier to sew. And I don't think until you've done it both ways, you really just don't realise, and especially for beginners, working with a more stable fabric is much, much easier, and especially when you're doing machine sewing. So that's what I'm using, and it is a woven interfacing, a cotton woven interfacing. They are completely different. We use woven interfacing because in soft sculpture, because it stays flexible. It gives us the hold, but it stays flexible. So I'm using, mine's quite a heavy cotton canvas, but I'm still using a medium weight interfacing. So my print is a beautiful patchwork print that's going to give me so many great colours. So what I do is I take my piece of fabric large enough to accommodate all my fabric pieces, I iron on my interfacing, and then I trace and cut my shapes. So that's our body, front and back. And then we have the legs. So again, you can see all those great colours, giving me a patchwork look without having to do much work on that at all. So we've got also our leg pieces are interfaced, and you've got the 2 pairs there, of course. Make sure you do transfer all of your markings on your pattern pieces. So then we move on to the arms. Now the arms are done a little differently. So the arms, we actually trace onto our doubled fabric. This time for the arms, we have no interfacing. My reason for doing that is we want those arms to sit nice and soft and to be quite floppy and comfortable. So no interfacing on this one. And I've traced around my pattern template and just pinned it into place. We are going to be sewing directly on that line and then cutting out. It's much easier to do your pattern pieces that way. So you don't cut this piece out. We just get it assembled like this, ready to stitch. So pop that one aside, and then we move on to the all-important head. So for the head, we start with the back head. Again, interfaced. So the back of the head here, on the back of the head, we have a disc that we add for reinforcing. We're going to be sewing, we're going to be turning the head through a cut that we're going to make through here, and we reinforce this section so that we don't have any splitting or tearing when we do that. Now, I do this technique because what it allows you to do is stitch around the entire outside of the head and you get a perfect finish. You don't have to do any tricky ladder closings, and the line and shape of the head is absolutely perfect. So that's why I do it. You'll find it's really simple. So this piece is actually fabric with fusible webbing applied, because we're going to be pressing that in place. So now with the front of the head, very, very simple detailing on this bear. Again, we've got our interfaced fabric. Now this is a key point. You'll notice that the front of the head, I've cut from fabric within my print that is quite light. And the reason for that is you want the facial details, and particularly the eyes, to stand out. If I were to use this section and put the eyes here, you would hardly see them. They're quite lost. But because I've cut it from this section, obviously those lovely black button eyes are going to really show up. So we have a muzzle piece, just removing that bit of thread there. We've got a muzzle piece cut from felt with fusible webbing applied, because we're going to be ironing that one on into place. We're going to be sewing around it. Then we have our beautiful big nose, our big bear nose, same thing, felt with fusible webbing applied. That will go there. We have our ear pieces, felt with fusible webbing applied. They are going to go here. It's a nice pop of colour. Notice that I've brought the pinks in because I've got that very plain colour on the head, and that will tie it all together. And then we need two eyes. I'm using 12mm black buttons. So it really is, we're keeping that lovely, simple, homely sort of a look with this project, and by using buttons it works really well. We're going to need some pearl thread to sew in a cute little smile. We're also going to need some pearl thread to be doing stitching around that muzzle and around those ear pieces. You can alternatively do that on the machine with a satin stitch. You're going to need some extra strong thread for your construction. You also need foot pads for those feet that we're going to be sewing in, and they are felt with interfacing applied. And you need a large button to attach the head to the body. Once we've done that, the arms are joined through that joint as well, and you just need that one large button. So that's about it. Polyester filling to fill. You can add a little bit of weight if you like, but super, super simple. So what we're going to start with here is we're going to start working on the body. We're going to start with our body back pieces. And the first thing you're going to do, you've got the marks here on your centre back seam. That is for your opening. We first of all go ahead and sew a tight zigzag stitch between those two marks, because what that's going to do, it's going to stop that edge from fraying. And remember, some of these steps, don't skip them, because you won't realise the benefit until you go to construct your teddy bear. So do that stitching, stops it stretching. Remember, we're going to be stuffing through that opening. It needs to be kept nice and true. So with that done, we're going to put our right sides together. Now, if you are making the animal, a different animal, because you can use the kitty head and the little dachshund head for this project, you may well be adding a tail. So making up your tail, I'm giving you two tail pieces, one for a cat and one for the little dachshund. And the way that you do them, it'll be written on your pattern templates. You actually do exactly the same thing with the tails as we do with the arms, and that is that you double your fabric over, you lay your template out, you draw around it, and then you stitch, leaving the top end open of the tail turn it through, add your little bit of stuffing, and then those tails get inserted into the mark. There will be a mark there on your pattern template, and it gets tucked in between those two layers. So, but in this case we're making the bear, so we won't be adding a tail at all, but just wanted to give you that option there to be able to do that with those other animals. So for this one, we are just putting right sides together, making sure everything is lined up really well. You can use clips or pins, whatever you like. And the seam that we're going to be sewing is the centre back seam. And we're going to leave that opening. So we're going to sew from the base to this mark and from this mark to the top there. Your seam allowance throughout this project is 4mm. Keep to that seam allowance, otherwise it will greatly alter the finished look of your teddy bear. I'm using polyester, 100% polyester thread in my machine. I have my machine stitch length set to a number 2, so it's nice and small. And every seam that I stitch, I sew twice. So I will sew that seam. Make sure you back and forth on all of your start and finish, particularly here, because that's the opening and we're going to be putting some pressure on there. And I sew one line of stitching and then a second line of stitching right over the top of it, because we are going to be stuffing this and it makes it very, very strong, particularly as a lot of these will be handled by children. So that's our back seam. Stitch to there, that seam, 4mm seam allowance, and then we take our body front pieces and we're going to do exactly the same thing. We are going to sew the centre front. Make sure it is the centre front seam. Again, it will be marked on your pattern pieces. But this time, of course, we don't need to leave an opening. So we're just doing our 2 rows of stitching with right sides together, 4mm seam allowance down that front section. Once you have sewn those 2 seams, so this is our front belly seam here and our back seam. You see how I've left that back opening unstitched? I've gone ahead and taken it to my iron and pressed that seam out nice and open and flat. It really does help with the finish of your bear. We're going to actually take these 2 pieces and we're going to put those aside for now, because now we have to create the legs, which are inserted into the body seam when we sew up the sides. So we need to have those done. So I've got my 2 leg pieces here. I'm putting them right sides together. Very, very straightforward. Again, that interfacing makes it so much easier. Line everything up. Very important that you line everything up, whether you use clips or pins. If you find it easier, you can sew an overcasting tacking stitch first. I find with this type of fabric, and because you've interfaced it, it's really easy. You often can do it just with pinning and clipping. So now I'm going to stitch from the top edge. We're leaving this section open. I'm going to stitch all the way down to the toe 2 times with that 4mm seam allowance, and all the way up along the straight edge there 2 times, same 4mm seam allowance. We leave the bottom open and the top open. Do that with both of those legs. Now that I have those legs stitched up, I'm going to show you how to pin in the foot pad, which is our next step. First of all, you want to press those seams, finger press the seams at the toe and the heel open and flat. That's going to make everything easier. So next you're going to take the foot pad and make sure that you're putting the toe, which is the wider section in this case, it's not always, but it is in this case, to the top. You've got a mark at the top of your pattern piece there. We're going to take a pin straight through where that mark is at the 4mm seam allowance. And then we're going to take that at the 4mm seam allowance straight through that front centre seam, and do make sure it's going right through the middle. You want this beautifully lined up. Push that pin head all the way down. Then we're going to go to the back of the heel and we're going to do the same thing. Pin through there
pin straight through that centre back seam. And again, pushing that pin head all the way down so that it's completely nice and tight, like that. So then we are just going to line up the rest of that foot pad with the lower edge of the foot there. But the way that we pin it is we're taking our pin straight through all of the layers, flip that over, and we're just going to take a little bit of the top layer of the foot and push the pin head all the way down. By pushing the pin heads all the way down, it's keeping them out of the way of your sewing, which makes it easier. You're not getting tangled up on everything, and it clamps it all together. So pin head all the way through, flip it over, take up a little bit on the other side, pin head all the way down. So all your pins are sitting flat. I've just done it with this one. This is what we're looking for. Now, this foot pad will fit perfectly if you have kept to your seam allowances. That's why it's so important to keep all of those measurements correct. So now I'm going to take my extra strong thread and I'm simply going to overcast, just tack that into place, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how we hand sew the top two curves into place. You can see there that I've got that foot pad all overcast into place and all my pins are gone now. So we're going to sew this in with a stab back stitch, which is the stitch we use to hand sew any soft sculpture creation. You can hand sew the entire animal if you like, but if you're going to do that, this is the stitch you need to use. But we use it on these sections that are tight and difficult, and we certainly can't get under the machine and give a good result. So I'm going to hand stitch just the top and bottom curve, then we'll connect up that sewing on the machine, because this section we can easily get under the machine. So we're going to start with a single strand of extra strong thread in a matching colour, and I've got a nice knot in the end. I'm going to come up on the underneath of the fabric through all the layers at the 4mm seam allowance. Pull that one all the way through. I'm going to just do one stitch. I'm going to keep my stitches nice and small and put another stitch straight over the top of it. Always do that to start with, and pull those stitches nice and firm. So then, travelling on the underneath again, I'm coming up, just travel the length of one stitch. Still at that 4mm seam allowance, and I'm taking my needle back into the last exit hole. Again, travelling from the underneath at that 4mm seam allowance and following the curve of that toe. And you can see the stitch is all completely linked back and front, and so because it is linked back and front and we're using extra strong thread, we only need to sew this once. With all of our machine sewing, we sew it twice. So each time I'm just travelling along and going back into that last exit hole. And what that gives me is a beautiful controlled seam, fully linked, just as strong back and front. So I'm going to continue around down to about the same spot on the other side. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the lower edge. Then I'm going to take it to the machine and join up that stitching on the machine. Of course, the machined area I have to sew twice. When you get to the centre here, do 2 stitches either side of that centre seam so that it's really locked in. So let me get that foot pad all stitched into place, then I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same with the other one. You can go ahead and turn that leg through once you've done all of your stitching. You should have a beautifully sewn foot pad there. And now we're going to, before we do anything else, we're going to mark in the line across each side
of that leg. Make sure it's all nice and flat. You can even press it if you like. And we're going to rule a line which is 9.5 centimetres from the top. Straight across, do the same on the other side, because what we're going to be doing is folding that one in. We're going to be stitching across, and it's going to create a little knee, a little folded knee. So this is the other leg all done, all filled, and that's our little knee joint. It's lovely because it means that they're a little more posable. Your teddy can sit on the edge of something and those legs dangle down. So, but what we have to do first is stuff the lower section of the leg. Now, what's important here is that you stuff the lower leg nice and firm, but you stop just a little way, probably 1.5 inches from that mark. So just very, very softly fill this section here, but firm pack everything else, because you need to be able to flatten that out and stitch across on the machine. And also, if you stuff it too full, that little leg won't drop like that. So that's what we're after. So go ahead and fill that lower limb. Forceps, if you've got them, are really handy because that's a long, long leg to take that stuffing through. And just pop that one in. Just medium-sized pieces are best for your stuffing. Take it all the way through to the toe first. Support the end so you're not going to take those forceps through. Another good reason for your interfacing, because it needs to be strong to handle that firm packing. So as I said, pack that firm till about 1.5 inches from here. Then take that, make sure that you've lined up the front and the back seam so that it's straight across, and stitch across 2 times. Now I have that bottom section of the leg filled. You can see that it's super firm. There's no give in that at all. Enough room for that knee joint to bend. And now we're just going to top up our filling in the thigh section. And we're going to pack super firm right up to that line of stitching. And then, like we did with the other section, we're going to stop our filling about 1.5 inches from the end. So by packing it very firm up to here, we get sort of a little knee there, and then this one, because it's not packed firm, drops down nicely. There's always a reason for these things that I tell you that I've learnt over the years. They make all of the difference to your finished product. And it's all the small things that add up to a successful project in the end. So really packing that in nice and firm, and then softening off as I get up through the midsection, and then no filling at all for about 1.5 inches. And then we go ahead and just take that to the machine, line up those 2 centre seams, and just zigzag or stitch across, ready for that to be incorporated into the seam, just like I've done with this one. There we go, 2 cute little legs with those lovely knee bends there. So now we're going to come back to our body section. We're going to take our body front here, and what we have to do is add those legs to the front, so right sides together, toes pointing upwards to the neck and forwards, of course, and we're just going to stitch them into place. Just hand stitch them for now in that space between those 2 marks that we have there. Should fit absolutely perfectly. Just let that leg just extend beyond that edge there just a little, so we're making sure that we're really incorporating that into place. We're going to do the same with the other one, toes pointing upwards and forwards, and we're going to do the same with that one on that side. And then just take your extra strong thread, and we're just going to tack them into place for now. You could do it on the machine, it's just, I find it's easier just to do it just with a tacking stitch, so that when we put the body front and back together, it's all going to all be incorporated within that seam.
And because we haven't stuffed the top of that thigh, we've got it, it's easy to do. So stitch them both into place. So this is how those legs should look. So you've got them stitched into place. When we turn that through, they will sit out at the front there. So what we need to do now is we want to tuck those in. We're going to put our pieces together, our body, back and front. Now the best way is to start with your centre, front and back seams. So I'm going to add a clip right there at the base. Start with a clip there, and I'm also going to want to do that at the top, and we want those legs out the way so you can actually take them through the back opening. It's just going to make it easier if they're popping out there. The same with the other one. That gets them out of the way of your sewing. Being a bit of a contortionist bear here. Okay, so now we can clip the top, making sure everything's lined up, and then all the way around the side seams. You'll find they'll match up beautifully. Again, so long as you've kept to your seam allowances. Right the way down to the base here, and make sure that you're really incorporating those legs within that seam. So make sure enough of that leg is showing, same on the other side. So once you've got that all clipped into place, you can go ahead and machine stitch all the way around. Now I like to overcast mine first. I just find it's much easier because you are dealing with the legs here as well. Take the time to thread up your needle with your extra strong thread and just do an overcasting stitch all the way around. You can remove your clips and then you can go ahead and you sew the entire outside edge with that same 4mm seam allowance. Do go over the leg sections a couple of times as well to make sure that they're really secure. You can now go ahead and turn that body through, and you should have, and do check, you've got those legs nicely incorporated in that seam. They're nice and secure. You've got your lovely little body with those legs. So our next step is to fill this body cavity. Now you can add a little bit of weight to this if you like. Now I have mine just sitting on shelves, so this isn't going to be given to a child. So I'm putting just a little parcel wrapped in a stocking of some clean aquarium gravel, which will make him sit nicely, legs drop over the edge of one of my shelves. You can just fill him completely with polyester filling so that he's nice and huggable. You can also use plastic pellets that are specifically designed for soft toys. Totally up to you. So I'm going to start by just adding some of this filling. So the way that this animal is put together is we finish completely this part of the body because the arms and the head are joined as one technique. So I'm first going to pad out the base section of the body. Do make sure that you fill out that lovely belly there and the back, and I then will tuck in my weighted parcel and fill the rest of the body right up to the top. Now you do need to fill it firm enough that it's going to hold up that head well. So you can leave a little bit of give in it, but make sure this top section is filled out, and it should be filled out in a flattened sort of a shape. So when we add the head, we are going to be compressing that all together, so it needs to be quite firm. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done. I'll be able to show you better when that's all done. So that has the body all filled out, and it's very firm at the top there, which is where we're adding the head. A little bit of give here in the body, but still all of those lovely curves have been pushed out. A bit of weight in mine, so sits very well. So now I'm going to turn him over
and we're going to be sewing up that back section. So I've taken my wool felting needle. Now if you haven't got one, get one, because they're the most useful tool for packing in your filling. It's not what they're intended for, but that doesn't matter. It's perfect for the job. It packs in all of your filling. It stops it jumping back out at you. It also allows you to get up there in those important places and really pack that filling in so it stays up there. So now I'm going to take a single strand of extra strong thread and I'll put a really big knot or a big pile of knots in the end. And we're going to close this opening with a ladder stitch. So that's my big bunch of knots at the end. What we're going to do is take our needle in underneath and bring it out right at the 4mm seam allowance, right where that seam starts to open out. Bring our needle through and that knot will hold. Then we're going to travel straight across. So exactly the same spot across. We're going to travel down the length of one stitch and take that needle through. Keep your stitches fairly small so it closes together well. Give that a little tug and you can see we've got that stitch going across. That's the start of our closing there. Turn that around again. I'm now going to go back across and I'm going to go into the first hole that we made where that knot is. Do the same as we did on the other side. Travel down the length of a stitch, the same length as on the other side. It's important that you keep all your stitches the same length so it closes evenly. Give it a squeeze and pull that in. I'm using the deep reddish pink. I've got multicolours here, but I feel like that reddish pink is the best colour. Travelled across again. Each time we're going back across to the other side, keeping to the seam allowance, keeping our stitches the same, and back in to the last exit hole every time so that it's all linked. Again, give that seam a squeeze and pull on those threads. You can see it's starting to knit together. Your finished closing should be quite invisible. If you follow these steps, it certainly will be. So, taking my needle through again, each time. Every single time, give it a squeeze and pull that in. Don't be sewing halfway down and then think, oh, I better pull on those threads to pull it together. You've got to do it with every single stitch or it won't knit together nice and tight. So that's all there is to it. Back again, the opposite side, travelling down the length of the stitch. And as you're going, if you feel like you need more filling, you can go ahead and add that using your forceps. You can tuck some extra filling in if you feel you need that as you go. Continue on all the way down to the bottom and just cast off somewhere on the seam line here. Make a little knot and sink your threads back into the body. So that has my body section all filled, that back opening closed, and now we can move that one aside and we're going to make the arms. So the arms, as I showed you at the beginning, you have your two pieces of fabric, no interfacing applied on this one, folded together, and we've traced around that arm shape with a heat erasable marker. So now we can go ahead, pop some pins in there, and then we're going to sew. We leave an opening here, you've got your marks there, and we're going to sew all the way around the outside edge. I only sew it one time because there's only a little bit of stuffing going in the bottom of the hands, but we leave this section open, and do make sure you go back and forth at your start and finish because that's where we're going to be turning this section through. My next step is to go ahead once that is all stitched. We've left that opening there. We're going to cut this section out. Now, just a little tip, if you have pinking shears, it's a really great idea to use those to cut this one out because it's a curve and we can get sort of a notched effect going around. So you can see there, I'm not coming in too close, but just all the way around that edge with those pinking shears,
going to get a lovely curve when we turn it through. Don't worry if you don't have them. Just go ahead and cut just about a 4 to 5 millimetre seam allowance all the way around. Don't use your pinking shears here. We need a normal seam there so that we can turn that under. So I'm going to go ahead and get those cut out. Once you've done that, you can turn them through that opening and push out all of your seams. So I've gone ahead and turned those through, those arms, and I've got in there with my knitting needle up through that opening and pushed out all of those seams. Also go ahead and roll out all of those seams between your thumb and fingers. And then we will give it a press when we have done our stuffing. We're going to turn that little opening under. But for now, we're going to add some filling. Now this is really important. We are only going to fill just the lower ends of those hands, and you can pack them quite firm just like you did the feet, because that'll give some nice weight to them and it'll make them drop. Do not put any stuffing in the top section, so about halfway. I'm going to say that again, no filling at all in the top section. If you add any filling, these arms aren't going to sit nice and naturally and comfortably at the side. They will sit out and it will look really odd. So halfway, fill those arms, ease it off, and then no filling up here. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Again, my forceps are going to make that job really easy, getting in and around that curve, and make sure that you fill out that hand. And when you're filling that hand, we're not just filling a hole when we're adding stuffing, we're actually sculpting a shape. So I'm going to take that filling down, right the way down to the end. And I've got this nice broad shape at the end and I want to keep that. So if I just randomly put stuffing in there, I'm going to end up with just like a big sausage. What I'm looking to do is shape it to a nice sort of a flattened shape. And you still get it packed very, very firm, but keeping that nice shape. So it's more of an eclipse shape rather than just a big sausage circle. So let me get those two filled and I will show you how that looks. So there you can see the lower arms filled, softened off in the midsection here, and then absolutely nothing here. Let me show you on that and our little body there. The arms are going to sit joined here, and because there's nothing in that top section there, those arms sit nice. If you filled this top section, the arms would be poking out like this. So this is what we're after, a nice natural look. So we can move that body aside now, and we are going to start work on the all-important head. So let's start with the back of the head. We're going to prepare this ready to be able to make an opening here in the back of the head to turn the head through. So I've got my disc, my fabric disc with the fusible webbing applied. I'm removing that paper and we just add that circle just to the center of the head, slightly lower down. You can see the positioning where I've put it, really quite central. Certainly this way, a little lower down on the head though. So measure it from side to side, make sure that's correct. Get that one fused into place with a hot iron and a protective cloth. So once I've pressed that one into place, I've gone ahead on the machine and just sewn a close zigzag stitch, like a satin stitch, all the way around the outside, and that's secured that well. My next step is to find the center of your circle, and you just want to draw a line across that is 45 millimeters across. And then we're just going to, I do a couple of tacking stitches each side on the machine, just like you would a buttonhole. It just secures that opening. And then we're just going to take just a seam ripper in the center, just to start to open that up. I'm then going to take my very sharp little scissors and we're going to create that opening through which we're going to turn the whole head when it's time to do that. So this will be already prepared. cut through your tacking stitches. That's the opening that we're going to turn the head through. So now we can put that one aside and we can move on and start with the other pieces of our head. So what we need to do, again, these pieces all have the heat activated, our fusible, I've forgotten the name of it, our fusible webbing on the back of all of these pieces. So I've removed that and I'm going to centre the muzzle section. Now what you have to remember with this one is that we're sewing the seam all the way around the outside. We're also stuffing the head. It will be stuffed and kept quite flat with our stuffing, but it will still bring this out a little. So we have to sit that template far enough from the lowest section of the chin, and my measurement that I will give you is 2 centimetres from the lowest part of the chin to the start of that template. That way it's all going to be sitting right and our eyes are going to be in the right position. Everything is going to be nice and balanced. So I will go ahead, make sure you measure from side to side, get that one pressed into place, and then at the same time you want to remove the backing paper on those ears and do the same thing. Now they sit up just a little higher than what that curve would be. We're actually going to stitch along that line. So you line them up with just enough room around the outside for that seam to happen. I press these all on one at a time. I don't try and do it all at once. Make sure again that they're nicely centered and press all 3 of those into place using a hot iron and a protective cloth. The next thing we need to do once we have those pieces pressed into place is we need to sew around the outer edge of them. Now you can do this a couple of ways. You can take it to the machine and sew that close zigzag stitch just like we did on the back there. You could do that in a coordinating or a contrasting colour. That will work well, or you can do what I'm going to do, and I think with this project, because it's such a quick and easy project, this is a good way to really add some beautiful hand detail work in there. So I'm going to take a single strand of pearl thread. I'm using a variegated pearl thread and it is an 8 ply. I find that's just about the right weight and I knot in the end. I'm going to come from the underneath of my pattern piece. This is a blanket applique stitch. So it's a great stitch to have in your skill set. So the knot is held behind. I've come in right on the edge of my shape there. I'm going to keep that moved out of the way and I'm going to take 1 stitch. I'm going to keep these stitches nice and small. I don't want to interfere too much with the shape of the muzzle there. And I've just taken my needle through all the layers and brought it right out on the edge again. But you are taking some of that bottom layer up. And I'm bringing my needle out through the loop. So I'll show you the next stitch. Travelled along just a little way, going in, coming out right on the edge, taking up some of that underneath fabric. And my needle's being pulled out through the loop. There we go. And pull that one in nice and tight. So what that creates, that little loop creates the line that will frame up this pattern piece all the way around, just like a blanket stitch that's done on the edge of fabric. So I do have a video that shows you this stitch really up close and in very clear colours, and you might find that handy, so I'll put the link at the top of the screen there for you to have a look at that one if that helps you. But you can see there, I'm just going to continue on making my way. This is a nice variegated pink, so it's going to change colour as I go around, but it's going to bring all of my colours together because the rest of my little bear has a lot of these pinks in it. So, but you can match your colour or as I have contrasted. So I'm going to stitch around this piece. I'm going to do the same around the ear pieces, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add the nose. You can see that stitching all done around those pieces, and it really is a lovely hand-made effect there that is really nice to add a bit of detailing like that. So now I've gone ahead and pressed on my nose section in the same way, removed the backing paper and pressed it into place. It's around about 1¼ centimetres from the top. That's the best position. You don't want it too low, and you don't want it up here touching this top section of your muzzle. We need just enough room to do a little smile as well. So now I'm going to do the same thing with my black pearl thread, and I'm going to stitch around the outside of the nose. Again, you can do that on the machine if you would prefer. So my final step on the face detail is to put in the little mouth line. Now if you've got a little stencil like this, you can use a stencil to draw that in. It's very important that it's a very simple little smile, and make sure it drops down far enough. It's around about, I would say, 9 millimeters from the base of the nose, and don't make it too wide. So just a sweet little smile like that. I've used a heat erasable marker because I can stitch over it and then I can get rid of those lines. You can sew this on the machine. If you are, make sure that you sew over it 2 times so that it's nice and bold. Otherwise, you can just sew an embroidery stitch like I am using that same black pearl thread, and it's basically just your stab back stitch again. So I'm just going to follow that line, bringing my needle up from the underneath and keep that all linked until that smile is in place. And then I'll take it to the iron and remove any of those marks. And then we'll be ready to go ahead and put this front and back head together. So that smile is now all nice and clean. I've pressed that to remove those heat erasable marks. Before we put the head together, I've just gone ahead and made a couple of marks for the eyes, but we do add the eyes after the head is put together so that we can pull them in a little. It gives it a much better look. But I do like to have that positioning temporarily marked. It's just a guide. That can change when we put the head together, but at least this gives us a starting point. So the positioning for the eyes, let me just show you. Remember, you've got to allow for the fact that it's going to pull in. So this section needs to be wide enough that when it pulls in, there's still going to be a nice space there. So have a good look at that positioning. It sits right in that little curve. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to put right sides together, the front and back of the head. We're going to pin or clip that all the way around, and you can also overcast it if you prefer to do that. I tend to overcast everything so that nothing slips, and this is the outer face shape, so you do need that to be right. You've got marks on the lower chin there that help you line that up, and then you can go ahead and sew around that whole face shape 2 times with a 4mm seam allowance, just as we have throughout. Once you have that head all sewn up, those 2 times all the way around, you can go ahead and turn that head through that opening that we've left in the back there. Forceps can help you do this. Take the ears through first, and then the rest will follow through easily. Then get something like a knitting needle to push out all of those seams, nice and rounded all the way around, and we'll get those all rolled out. So I've pushed all of those seams out, and I've even given that a press. So you've got that beautiful rounded face shape. Our next step is to go ahead, just take a ruler and your heat erasable marker again. You can see where the ears start and finish. Rule a line straight across with both of those, because we're not filling the ears. We are going to stitch straight across on the machine, just 2 times in a coordinating thread, and that's going to section off those ears, and then when we fill the head, we're going to get that nice sort of three-dimensional look there, which is really nice. So I'm going to take that to the machine, and as I said, stitch 2 times back and forth on those lines. Okay, so now we're ready to fill the head. So obviously only this section of the head is going to be filled, and we do that through that back opening that we've made. Now there's a very particular way that you need to fill this head. If you just go ahead and stuff all of your polyester filling in there, you're going to get a head that is a ball. We don't want a ball shape. We're trying to keep that nice flattened shape. So the best way is to use your forceps, and I'm taking the stuffing right to the edge. So I'm going to fill the head out really nice and firm all the way around the edge. And you can see with my thumb and my hand, I'm keeping that flattened shape while still making it nice and firm as I go. And I'm going to work my way all the way around the outside edge. Keep checking from the front as you go. You can see already that it's filling it out nicely, and it's not just creating this big ball head. We want a nice flat sort of a face at the front to show off all that work we've done. So you can see there, it's easy enough with a pair of forceps to just make your way around, and I'm going to keep doing that. You can also use your wool felting needle as you go and get in there with that wool felting needle and tuck those fibres in so that they stay pushed out. So you can see that I'm just rotating this head as I go, adding more filling right the way around. Make sure that you're getting all those lovely curves, keeping them nice and fluid. So I'm going to keep doing that and until that whole head is filled out, and then I'll go around a couple more times, and the whole time keeping it a flattened kind of an ellipse shape, not a big puffed ball. Let me get that filled up and I'll show you how it should look. So this is the finished shape that we're looking for with this head. So you can see that it's quite a flattened shape. We've kept all that lovely broad face there. All the facial features are pushed out beautifully, and it's very, very firm. So now flip that one over and we're going to just sew up that back section. I did take my wool felting needle and I just made sure to pack and tuck everything in, and I've also gone all the way around the edge with that so that it's keeping all of that stuffing out. So the middle section of the bear's head, when you fill it that way, it tends to fill itself in the centre. So super easy to do. So let's start by closing this opening. So I've got just my single strand of extra strong thread. I'm just going to come in at the start where I've got that bit of bar tacking across there on the underneath. Now this isn't seen because this is how it's joined to the body. So we're really just looking to do some simple overcasting stitches to close this up. Just use a matching thread colour. I'm just going back and forth across that opening, pulling that nice and tight to close those edges together. And once I've gone all the way along, I'm going to backtrack and go back again. So I just sew it 2 times with this overcasting stitch before I cast off. There you go, nice and neatly bound that little opening there. So now we're going to add the eyes. So this is super simple to do. We've got our buttons and we've got our approximate markings there. And now that I've filled the head, I can test that and see that when I pull those eyes in, they're going to be in exactly the right position. So I've got my little black button ready. I've got a doubled strand of extra strong thread. You need extra strong thread for this. We're going to come in from the back, somewhere quite central. going to take my needle through and just come out one side of that mark that I've made. Pull that all the way through, leave the tail ends hanging. I'm going to come in from the underside of the button, back through the front, and then I'm going to go in just the other side of that mark, and I'm going to bring my needle out quite close to the first one. In this case, we are tying off to the fabric. At the back of the head, pull that in. You want to make sure that your threads aren't twisted as you're pulling that in, and you can give it a little test. Pull that eye in and see whether it's in the correct position. You can see such a lovely look when the eyes are pulled in like that. If you sew them on the top before we put it together, which of course is an option, then they're sitting on the top and they don't give that realistic sort of a look. So now all I need to do is take those two thread ends and tie them off, and I can make sure to keep up that tension while I'm doing that. I can press down on that button with my thumbs, keep the tension up and really knot that off nice and firm so that eye is sitting perfectly. I then just repeat with the other eye on the opposite side. So that has both those eyes put into place. And just a little tip, when you're using a 2-hole button, have them going across and slightly on the diagonal. So it looks better than the buttons, the holes going up and down. So then that's my finished off. I've knot off there at least 4 times. I've still got my needle on, so I can just take those thread ends through the head, come out anywhere there, and you can sink those nicely. Makes it all nice and tidy at the back there. Then I'll rethread these onto the same needle. I'm using a medium doll needle to do this, makes it so much easier. I'll do the same thing and sink those, and then we'll have a nice neat finish at the back of the head. Okay, so now we're ready to add this head to our body, but first we've got to add the arms. It's actually all put together through the same button joint, but to make things easy, I take, first of all, my arm piece, and you can see, so we've just got the centre of the arm piece here, which just lines up with the top there. Just make sure it's nice and even. And those arms are just going to be attached with some thread. So I'm just simply going to start at the front and pass through the back here and back again. So this is just a temporary tie off. Just to keep that in place. I'm just going to knot that off. Pull that in, knot that off a couple of times and snip those thread ends. Okay, so those arms are just temporarily held there in place, they're not going to move. Now we have to determine where that head is going to sit. Now it obviously has to cover this section here. You don't want it sitting down too low, it will look very odd. There is a sweet spot there, and you'll find if you turn it around, you'll be able to get an idea. Our button is sitting on the back here. You need to leave about 1 centimetre from the top of the body section, and we're going to be attaching the head by diving straight through, going back again and tying that all off. So I've made a mark right in the centre of mine. I know that my attachment point is just below that opening that we stitched. So I don't need to make any other mark on there. But where we're going to start, so we've got our button, doesn't matter if it's a 2-hole or a 4-hole, but you do need to only use 2 of the holes. So as I said, this is where we start with our button, and we're going to go in through with a doll needle
and a double strand of thread put through my dowel needle, and it's given me now 4 strands. I want that to be nice and strong. I'm taking that needle straight through, and I'm making sure that I'm staying parallel. I'm not going up on an angle. I want it to go straight through. So I need to check that, and I need to be coming out right in the centre. So just bringing that through. I'm doing this on camera, so it's a bit of an awkward angle. So I'm going to take that through and leave those tail ends hanging. We can just pin that up for now so that we won't lose that button. And let me grab that head. I've lost that head. Okay. So when I come to the back of the head now, I've got to dive in. Remember I said my connection point is just below. Here's the centre. So I'm going to take a nice big stitch and travel across, make sure it's central and that it's straight. And that's how we're going to hold that head. So you need to give it enough to hang on to. So there's my stitch going across. Pull that through, and then I'm going to travel back the path that I just came, but for the other buttonhole. So you move across a little and travel back through and come out, bring your needle out through the other buttonhole on the other side. Let me do that and show you how that will look. Okay, so that has my head in place, nice and movable. You need to check you haven't got any of your threads twisted, so you can see what's happened. It's like it's on a little pulley system. So we've gone through one buttonhole all the way through, big bite out of the head, back again and travelled back through to the button. So here we are at the back, and we need to really compress all of those layers nice and firm and knot that off at least 4 times, and then you can do the same thing with your needle and dive back into the body and lose those thread ends, rethread the others and take it in. But you really do need to compress all of those layers so that head is really firm and in the right position. But do check that it is. So this is the look. So we've got a nice posable head. It's not sitting too far down on the body. We've got that lovely little face looking up at us. That's about perfect. So I'm going to get that knotted off, and we're going to have a look at our bear all finished. So is that not the quickest and easiest pattern ever for a teddy bear? It's fantastic for creating for perhaps you're selling at craft markets. It's a great pattern to make multiples of, and of course because you can use fabric, that colour range is amazing. So you're not limited to just felt. I've got him sitting there, of course, with those lovely bent knees though. He can sit over an edge. He looks gorgeous. I've added to him my lovely little bag charm. I've also got a free pattern and tutorial for that one, where you get to make the little bear, the little heart-shaped charm, perfect for accessorising little bears like this. And of course you can do different colour buttons for the eyes. You can embellish these, add anything you like around that neck. But what a fantastic basic pattern. You can make it up in fleece, as I said. If you are making it up in fleece, of course you can't iron interfacing onto the back of fleece, but if you use a good quality fleece you'll get a good result without interfacing. It'll be a very, very cuddly bear. If you are using fleece, make sure that you still keep that head nice and flat so that we get that full face. Now remember also that you can create this same project using our beautiful little dachshund head. So you can have a little seated dachshund, which would be gorgeous, and a little kitty. So little kitty head will work as well on this pattern. And as I said, I've given you the tails to add to that back seam and given you the markings on there to do that. And also I've got that little bear, so little tiny bear. It's kind of like a mini me, isn't it?
So different arms and legs, but another simple little pattern. I just think it's going to be a pattern that's going to be used again and again. And I hope you've all enjoyed it. I hope you find it really useful. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all the amazing creations that you're going to create with this. Thank you for joining me. So I'm really looking forward to seeing someone make this one up as a cat and as a puppy. So can someone please do that and post it on our Facebook page. So if you haven't joined, the link is down below to come and join our Facebook page. That's where you can post all of your beautiful creations that you make with my patterns, masterclass or pay it forward. And I do love to see them. We all love to see them, and it gives everybody else different ideas of how to put things together and how to style them up. So don't be afraid of colour with this design. It's all about using your stash and using all of those pieces of fabric you never thought you'd get to. So I think it's going to be a super useful pattern. And also remember those videos from way back. That little bag charm is from way back in my list. You've got to scroll right back, and this little bag charm makes up beautifully every time. And a big shout out to beautiful Kathleen, my friend, who has made up a couple of these this week, and I'll share it on Instagram. Beautiful job, Kathleen. I do love to see the little work. It's what really brings me joy. So a beautifully sewn anything, tiny or big, is gorgeous. So look, everybody, have a creative week. Stay tuned for masterclass launch. That's very soon, in a couple of days. I'm so looking forward to sharing this month's project with you all. So join me on the 1st right here on Pay It Forward, and there will be a giveaway as well. So in the meantime, everybody have a fantastic, very colourful, creative week, and keep on paying all of those good things forward. Until next time, it is hooroo from me.